celebrated cultural movements in American history. By the end of this story, you'll understand why he believed the 60s may not have unfolded the way we were told, and why asking that question changed the course of his life. David McGowan entered the world on March 19th, 1960, in Torrance, California. At the time, Torrance was a quiet suburban pocket of Los Angeles. Sidewalks, driveways. It looked like the most ordinary.
So I'm gonna watch some of this David McGowan Laurel Canyon video with you guys. Hopefully you'll pop in and catch it. This is extremely interesting. It really shows the marriage between the military-industrial complex and rock and roll music. And if you want to move it forward, now hip hop music. So this is like the grandfather of the conspiracy of music. Here we go.
Childhood imaginable. But only a few miles away, something extremely unusual was beginning to unfold. A strange, psychedelic current was beginning to pulse through California, a sound that would soon explode into a cultural revolution, tearing the country away from the buttoned up innocence of the 50s and into the wild and electric energy of the 60s. Some people say this movement was born out of thin air. Others say it was manufactured. It depends on who you ask. While David was sitting.
Definitely, in my opinion, this was 100% manufactured. Yeah, it doesn't get any more clear at a manufactured scene than this whole 60s rigmarole. Let's continue here.
Backseat of his parents' car, looking out at the endless rows of palm trees, something new was creeping onto every radio station. Music that didn't sound like anything before it. Strange harmonies, strange voices, strange lyrics. Something was waking up in Los Angeles. Something powerful enough to change the culture of the entire country. And it all seemed to be coming from one tiny secluded enclave tucked high in the hills. Laurel Canyon.
Yep.
Laurel Canyon was not New York. It was not Nashville. It was not a place the music industry cared about. Heck, it only had one store and was home to only a few hundred people at the time. It had no major studios, no established venues, no reason for a wave of future legends to suddenly appear there. Yet in the
Yeah, so you have to understand this is in the early 60s, and this was like a little butt fuck nowhere town. Yet all of these major rock stars came from this area. So we'll continue. He'll explain it a bit more. It's crazy what they find. Let's go.
months of 1965, they did. Musicians who would become household names arrived almost overnight.
Yep.
Some had barely picked up their instruments. Some had never written a song. Some had never performed live. Yet they hit the scene as fully formed stars. And for reasons nobody could explain, they all moved into the exact same tiny area. Not miles apart, not spread across Los Angeles. But within walking distance of one another lived Jim Morrison, Frank Zappa, David Crosby, and Stephen Stills. Individuals who were
Yeah, there's all these guys. Every one of them lived all together in this little town. There's the famous story of Jim Morrison meeting Ray Manzarek on Dennis Jacobs' rooftop with the lyrics to Moonlight Drive. And then he recites them to Ray Manzarek. And Ray Manzarek is like, hey man, we got to form a band. And that's how the Doors were formed.
virtually unknown, but would soon rise to superstardom in unison. We're talking about the Mamas and the Papas, Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda, actors, writers, poets, an entire generation of cultural influencers, all mysteriously drawn to one isolated spot that was not known for music at all. This was the part of the story that fascinated McGowan, because as a child, he grew up watching this strange transformation unfold around him. This was not happening in Tokyo or London, it was happening in his city. He watched the clean cut world of his early childhood disappear. He watched the long hair, the neon colors, the drug culture.
Almost like a bunch of agents went into a place and infiltrated it, used drugs and mind control to change the opinion of many people. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit crazy. That could be crazy though.
And the political chaos rise from the very same place these musicians and celebrities called home. Laurel Canyon was turning into the epicenter of an emerging counterculture. Everything appeared normal at first, and it would be over 20 years before David would begin his research. But when he did, he would find the entire thing felt strangely synchronized. Too sudden, too coordinated, too perfect. Everything about their rise felt effortless. Everything about their location felt deliberate.
So there's a great band, or a great movie. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's called The Wrecking Crew. And the Wrecking Crew was the kick-ass band that actually wrote and played all the songs of all of these bands. So all the bands that were on the record albums, and they might have been singing the vocals, had a backing band called the Wrecking Crew. And yeah, you can go watch that movie if you don't believe me. So there.
This sudden convergence is where McGowan would later draw the first lines of his investigation, because the deeper he looked, the stranger the pattern became. These people were not random dreamers chasing fame. Many of them were the children of military officers, intelligence officials, or defense contractors. And the quiet hills they moved into were not as peaceful as they seemed. All his life, David McGowan had no idea he was growing up next to something unnatural, something that would one day become the centerpiece of his most controversial work, something that might not have been a cultural revolution at all, but something designed to look like one.
Yep.
A movement that felt organic on the outside, a movement built on art, love, and self expression. But
So here's another little interesting tidbit. Um, the LSD that was used during Woodstock, during the Monterey festival, was a particular recipe made by the original synthesizer of acid. His name is Albert Hoffman. And this guy, there's a famous bicycle ride that he did, and he was synthesizing ergot out of rye bread or something like that. And that's what the LSD is. And he had this famous bicycle ride. So his recipe is the orange sunshine recipe that Owsley, the famous chemist of the Merry Pranksters, um, distributed for free all around California. So, and it was made at Berkeley and at UCLA, a lot of it. So, there you go.
that may have been engineered from above, perhaps to relieve the pressure building around a turbulent moment in American history when our president had just been killed, civil rights protests were gaining momentum, and the Vietnam War was in the process of drafting over 2 million young Americans into military service of which they had no choice. Though strangely enough, none of these young artists mentioned here were ever called to serve, even though they were mostly all eligible. But in 1965, little David couldn't know any of this. For him, it was just a strange new world forming 20 miles from home. A world of loud guitars, psychedelic imagery, strange adults talking about peace and revolution. It was history happening in real time, and it was only the beginning. By early 1965, something unusual was happening in Laurel Canyon. What had been a quiet hillside neighborhood suddenly filled with people who would become the faces of the psychedelic revolution. The way they arrived made it even stranger. They seemed to come practically all at once, many from out of state and with no previous connection to Los Angeles. Within a remarkably short span of time, the canyon was crowded with new bands, new writers, and new performers, all rising together. Nearly all of
So Jim Morrison's father was the admiral on the boat that the Bay of Tonkin incident happened. And the Bay of Tonkin incident was where they had 60,000 ground troops go on Vietnam for the first time. So it was basically the beginning of the Vietnam War. It was a false flag attack on an American vessel, which Jim Morrison's father was the admiral of, which means he was the big guy on the boat. So the admiral of the beginning of the Vietnam War is the father of one of the main antagonists of the Vietnam War. Uh, his son was like one of the anti-war golden god, uh, Pied Pipers. So it was very Hegelian dialectic. If you really get down to it, it's brilliant tactical social engineering.
arrived within the same year. That alone is suspicious. But the backgrounds of these soon to be icons made the story even stranger. A remarkable number came directly from families tied to the United States military, intelligence networks, and the defense industry. One of the clearest examples is Jim Morrison of The Doors, who showed up in Los Angeles with no musical background, yet became one of the most influential singers in American history. His father was Admiral George Stephen Morrison, the naval officer at the center of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which has since been uncovered to have never even happened, but nevertheless pushed the United States into the Vietnam War, destroying countless lives in the process. In the same band, Ray Manzarek had served as an intelligence analyst for the Army Security Agency. Robbie Krieger, their guitarist, came from a family tied to the military industrial sector through his father, Stuart Krieger. Morrison's longtime partner, Pamela Corson, was the daughter of Columbus Corson, a highly decorated Navy bombardier and commander in the Naval Reserve. This pattern continued across the canyon. Frank Zappa of the Mothers of Invention grew up near chemical warfare research facilities where his father worked. Despite being clean cut in suit and tie just months prior, Zappa somehow became a central figure in an anti establishment musical scene. His wife Gail's father was a high ranking nuclear weapons research physicist. David Crosby of Crosby.
Yeah, that's crazy. Frank Zappa was probably my favorite guitarist of all time. I literally have a tattoo of that guy on my fucking arm because I loved his guitar playing so much. And to find out they're all a fraud, I mean, at this point, everybody is a fucking fraud as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it's, a bit disheartening, right?
Stills and Nash, came from an elite family with deep Hollywood and government connections through his father, Floyd Crosby, an Academy Award winning cinematographer. His bandmate, Stephen Stills, spent much of his youth on and around U.S. military installations in Central America, living among American advisors during active conflicts. Individually, each of these stories might sound like coincidence: a musician with a military father, another musician who grew up on a base, another whose family worked in the defense industry. But when the list keeps growing, the coincidences begin to look different. Because these were not scattered musicians across the country, they were neighbors, living within the same few winding roads in Laurel Canyon. Bernie Ledden of the Eagles was the son of Dr. Bernard Ledden Sr., an aerospace physicist involved in missile guidance systems. And Joe Walsh grew up as a Gold Star son. The Mamas and the Papas member, John Phillips, was the son of a Marine and attended the U.S. Naval Academy. And both he and Mama Cass attended the same high school as Jim Morrison, George Washington High, in the shadow of the Pentagon, just minutes from the heart of Washington, D.C.
Isn't that crazy how they're all so close together? It's pretty fascinating, actually.
Jackson Browne was born on a U.S. military base in Germany, while his father worked for the OSS, the intelligence agency that would become the CIA. Graham Parsons of the Byrds came from an elite Southern family with strong political and military ties. Even the pop oriented groups followed the same pattern. Michael Nesmith of the Monkees served in the Air Force.
The only thing though I don't like is this is an AI video, and I shouldn't even be fucking playing it, to tell you the truth. But I did find this. I've always wanted to sort of present this, to you guys to let you know really what's going on, because after all, I'm just a conspiracy theorist.
And his mother's liquid paper empire tied her into high level corporate and defense circles. His bandmate Peter Tork spent part of his childhood on a military base in Berlin, where his father was stationed as a first lieutenant during the Cold War. Joni Mitchell's father also had a military career, and she spent much of her life growing up on bases
Oh, there we
around the
go.
globe. The list goes on and on. And while the public believed these musicians were writing and recording the songs themselves, in reality, the real sound of the 1960s was created by an elite
Oh
group
no.
of studio players known as the Wrecking Crew. They performed on countless albums credited to
That's
the
not
newly
it.
arrived
Fuckers.
Canyon musicians, creating a polished musical foundation for artists who often had little experience. But the pattern did not stop with the music. A parallel wave of actors moved into the canyon at the same time, and many of them had backgrounds just as intertwined with military and intelligence circles. Jack Nicholson served in the California Air National Guard during the Berlin crisis. Peter Fonda was the son of famous actor Henry Fonda, who also happened to be a decorator.
So you notice the pattern? They're all part of the military industrial complex, and it seems that's where the best actors come from. You know, the best actors are cops. Huh, who'd have thunk it?
Naval intelligence officer and Bronze Star recipient. Dennis Hopper, known for playing counterculture rebels, was the son of J. Millard Hopper, an operative in the wartime OSS. Between the three of them, they would go on to produce and star in films like Easy Rider, The Trip, Head, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. These movies created the first mainstream visual definition of what the counterculture looked like. Actors shaped the imagery. Musicians shaped the sound. And almost all of them came from the same neighborhood, with backgrounds that connected them to the very institutions the counterculture claimed to resist.
Yeah. So all of these rock stars who are supposed to be like anti-government and all this are they're literally plants. They're literally plants. Their fathers are all military industrial complex machine components. It's pretty crazy, man. It really is. So look at the celebrity culture now. Would you know? Do you think it's changed, or do you think it's just gotten worse? I mean, what do you think? Let me know in the comments.
Laurel Canyon was supposed to be an organically grown community of artists. Instead, it looked more like a gathering place for the sons and daughters of powerful families, state officials, and military personnel. And that was only the beginning of the mystery. As Laurel Canyon filled with musicians, actors, and soon to be cultural icons, the neighborhood gained a reputation as a creative refuge. To the public, it looked like a quiet hillside community where artists gathered to write music, share ideas, and experiment with the sounds that would soon define a generation. But while the musicians and artists were developing their crafts in the homes scattered along the canyon roads, something else existed just out of frame. High above Laurel Canyon sat a facility that very few people knew was there.
Oh, yeah.
And the work happening inside.
Here we go. This is where it gets weird. And we all know it gets weird.
Already having profound, never before seen effects in shaping American identity, culture, and how we were presented to the world. Hidden behind locked gates, barbed wire, and layers of security stood Lookout Mountain Air Force Station, a massive Cold War era facility that most residents did not know existed. It was not a simple military building. It was a full scale production studio with sound stages, editors, animators, chemists, and technicians. It produced propaganda films, nuclear test footage, classified research reels, and psychological operations material
Maybe that's where they filmed the moon landing.
for the intelligence community. At its peak, Lookout Mountain was rumored to be producing more film than many major Hollywood studios combined.
I don't know why I can't see the comments. Well, I think I know why. This channel got hacked, but we'll just continue.
Residents of the canyon often reported strange activity near the gates of Lookout Mountain,
Fuckers.
including armed guards, electrified fences, and security patrols. Floodlights left on all night, industrial traffic from the laboratory was clogging up the streets, and secretive shipments moving in and out of the base. Locals described it as a mysterious, windowless concrete bunker sitting atop their peaceful, rustic neighborhood. Little did they know of the important work being done inside. This
The important work. Listen to this guy. Holy fuck. Yeah. Okay. Whatever, Joe.
military's top secret Hollywood movie studio, and the place was massive. So big that it needed two underground parking garages, its own helipad, movie theater, and even its own fallout shelter. Low estimates say Lookout Mountain would release over 6,500 films in its 22 years in operation, though the facility's exact catalog of productions remains classified. Even today, large portions of its output are locked away in government archives. We do know that many
So that's crazy, eh? This studio had higher technology than every other studio in Hollywood. Think about that. A hidden studio where all the actors lived with more technology than, Disney at the time. That's weird. Really weird.
films were shot there, and that such stars as Marilyn Monroe, Jimmy Stewart, Ronald Reagan, and even Walt Disney lent their talents to these top secret endeavors. For years, speculation has surrounded its role in producing staged footage for major Cold War operations. Some even claimed that the Apollo moon landing footage was filmed there, a rumor that has never been confirmed or disproven. Whether true or not, the secrecy is what gives the claim its power.
Well, I have a video on my channel of Stanley Kubrick mentioning in it. It's somewhere called Moon Landing or something. Scroll down on my channel feed and have a look.
This even stranger was the contrast between the two worlds. On the hillsides below, young artists were preaching peace, freedom, love, and rebellion. Directly above them sat one of the most advanced psychological operations film studios the United States had ever built. The two environments had no obvious reason to exist side by side, yet they did, and they grew in influence at the exact same moment. This unusual mix of secrecy and spectacle set the stage for the counterculture revolution that would soon sweep across the United States. The canyon looked like a playground for musicians, but something deeper was humming beneath the surface. Something few people ever questioned. Something that remained invisible at the time, yet is impossible to ignore when the pieces are viewed together today. This was the shadow that hung over Laurel Canyon, a cultural awakening unfolding beneath one of the most secretive government film facilities in America. And whether coincidence or design, that combination shaped the world that followed. This was the environment that would birth the psychedelic era, And the deeper the story goes, the stranger the landscape becomes. In those same early months of 19...
Pretty crazy, eh? So we'll continue tomorrow, and thanks for watching.